Okay, there go my classical antiquitous ankles. Oh. Ow. Ow. Good evening, Wait. Rule of thirds. That's better. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. I am host and mastermind of tonight's video proceedings, Messiahs and Mythology. Now, please don't be alarmed by the length. Never had to say that before. This project was actually several months in the making and features 6 different creators, including myself, handpicked for their artistic vision and powerful... Yeah, you know what, they were the ones who responded to my email. Each creator was tasked with submitting a video covering a monster from the mythology or folklore of their choice. Naturally, chapters will be listed in the video playback bar, as well as links to each creator's respective channels. I'd highly recommend watching this video the whole way through and checking out each and every one of the people who contributed to this project. And who knows, maybe you'll like them so well you'll end up subscribing to their channels. No, seriously, please do that. They will not associate with me for any other reason other than clout. Alright, so we got a lot of ground to cover, and only so much Halloween to do it. So let's get to it. Starting off tonight's proceedings, we have yet another channel whose name is an alliteration whose initials are M and M. I dare say that's plagiarism, however, seeing as I have the cooler of the two names, I'll let it slide. Ladies and gentlemen of the internet, Mythology with Mike.
Happy Halloween, everybody. Since it's the spookiest time of year, I thought it would be fitting to make a video in the spirit of the season. There are plenty of horror icons out there for me to talk about, like the Headless Horseman, Dracula, and everyone's favorite Squidman. But you know me, I like shedding light on lesser-known icons. Hence why today's video is about Camazotz. If you know anything about Camazotz, you probably think of him as a Maya Bat God. As with a lot of Native American deities though, there's a lot more to him than just his looks and what he's a god of. His origins are kinda hazy, and we're about to explore them now. In the Maya religion, Camazotz is depicted as a man with bat wings and a bat head. This has led some articles online to call him the Maya Batman, but that's not entirely accurate. If you're familiar with Batman lore at all, Camazotz is more like a Maya man-bat. Admittedly, the Maya Batman just makes for a more clickable title, I suppose, so we'll give them a pass. In the Maya language Quiche, a language from Guatemala, Camazotz's name literally translates to Death Bat, and as mentioned previously, he is the god of the night, death, and sacrifice. The night part, that's pretty obvious. Bats are nocturnal, so of course a god based off of a bat would be a god of the night. The sacrifice part I'll get into more later, but for now, we're gonna control his connection with death, and Camazotz's only appearance in Maya mythology. The Popol Vuh is our main source for Maya mythology, and it'll get its own video, or videos, in the future. For now though, we're going over Camazotz's role in the story. The Popol Vuh starts with our twin hero gods of the Maya mythology, Wanapu and Xiblanque. These two brothers are going on an adventure into the underworld. You know, a regular Tuesday for hero gods, and they're going into the underworld by means of a cave. Eventually, the brothers find a place to lie down because this is a multi-day road trip. Unfortunately for them, they fell asleep in the House of Bats, and while sleeping, they're awoken by a swarm flying overhead. The brothers duck under some cover, and Xiblanque tells Wanapu to check and see if the sun has risen. These guys must have forgot they were in a cave or something, because the sun's not gonna shine into the cave. Wanapu raises his head to check for the sun, but Camazotz swoops in and immediately rips his head off. Don't worry about Wanapu though, he is a god, so he continues living, even without a head. Xiblanque knows that his brother would prefer to have a head, so they go to get it back. In the meantime though, Wanapu is running around with a squash on his head. While the brothers are sorting out the squash head issue, Camazotz takes the head further into the underworld to show off to the other underworld gods as a new trophy. And what do they do with this new trophy, you ask? They use it as a ball for their sport game. Yeah, normally the trophy comes after the game, but you know, I ain't gonna judge. The brothers followed Camazotz and they challenged the underworld gods to a game. And thanks to some trickery, because everybody loves the underdogs, they won and they got Wanapu's head back. The myth doesn't specify if Camazotz played in the game, but I didn't want to leave you guys hanging. which is why I'm talking about this sport game, even though it's unclear if Camazotz is directly involved in the game. I'll go into more detail on this story when I make a Popolval video, or videos. Now, there is something I should point out about this story. It's unclear if Camazotz is supposed to be a name applied to all bats, some bats, or just one in particular. Academia used to think it was a name for all bats, but in recent years that has come into question. The main thought process is that identifying every bat as Camazotz might be an oversimplification of the Maya religion. The bat iconography might be more complex than we initially thought. We can't know for sure though, because, a lot of the Mayans kinda died. Bats have symbology relating to death and sacrifice as originally thought, but they could also have fertility connections, be messengers of the gods, and other more positive traits that you don't normally think about when you think bats. I'm not really qualified to talk about this, but if you're curious, the paper Bats and the Camazotz, Correcting a Century of Mistaken Identity by James E. Brady and Jeremy D. Coltman go into more detail. I'll link them below. And lastly, let's talk about Camazotz's last deific domain. This is a shorter one. In another part of the Popolval, a being called Camazotz enters the human world and he makes a deal with the king. The deal is humans must give up their armpits and their waists, and in exchange, humans are allowed the knowledge of fire. This armpit and waist thing is basically saying they have to give up their torsos in exchange for fire. Humans realize without their torso, they lose their ability to do anything really, so they decide to sacrifice people to the gods instead. Okay, that's all the mythology stuff out of the way. So here's one last Camazotz theory for you before you go. In North America, there were these animals called megafauna, which are kind of giant versions of the animals we know today. Now, I'm not a zoologist, so what I said is probably just a vast oversimplification. Don't take me at my word. But I will tell you, there was a giant version of a bat in Mesoamerica. It's called the Desmodus draculae. This now extinct bat had a wingspan of 20 inches, or 50 centimeters, and it's theorized by some that when ancient North Americans came into the Mesoamerica, they encountered these creatures, and that's what inspired Camazotz. And honestly, considering how big these bats are, yeah, I don't blame you for thinking this thing is gonna fly down and rip your head off. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video about Camazotz. Maya mythology as a whole is very interesting, and I can't wait to talk about it more in the future. As a reminder, this video is part of a collaboration with several other mythology channels, so be sure to check out their stuff when you're done with this video. If you want to discuss more mythology or see memes, follow me on Twitter and join my Discord for more. Thank you for watching, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see more, and have a safe and spooky Halloween.
Do you ever feel small, insignificant, like you're a black sheep in a herd of white ones? Differentiating oneself and leaving behind a legacy for ourselves is a common aspiration among humanity. Well, that and wanting to fuck an anime character, but that's neither here nor there. Yet at the same time, there's something about the silence of solace which is oddly comforting. Maybe it's an alleviation from the day-to-day grind, or perhaps there's something more to it. Like the silence of solace is preparing us for the inevitable quiet of the infinite void which is our inevitable death. Or maybe you just don't like sharing your Legos with your cousin because he always puts the wrong head on the fucking figure. I was going somewhere with this, but I lost my train of thought. Fuck it. The next video is by a content creator you may already be familiar with for his extensive studying and anal alphabetical organizations of cryptids the world over. Either that, or being half of one of the worst mistakes God ever made. That being chickens. It's everyone's favorite foul dragon thing. It's a crowing cockatrice, okay? It's a crowing cockatrice.
Hello there, I'll be your guide for the next creature presented in this abhorrent list of abominations from around the world. However, the terrible thing I am going to show you is not a blasphemous beast, ghoulish ghost, vile vampire, or ominous ogre. This heinous horror is the baleful byproduct of botany. Alright, I'll stop with that now. So indeed, the being I brought for this occasion is but a piece of vegetation. However, it is not a boring ordinary plant or a shrub with magical properties. What I am about to describe here is a vicious being sustained by the blood of its victims. This plant is the Yetiveo, which I'm told translates to I see you, now I see you, or I already see you in Spanish. A menacingly odd name for a plant. It is said to live in Central and South America, as well as Central Africa and certain regions by the Indian Ocean. That's quite a range. But let's discuss that a bit later. You still do not know what it looks like after all. Well, the only thing you'd spot at first would be its trunk. A short and thick trunk from which tendril-like branches sprout. These stems hang down, lying on the ground near the plant, concealed by the undergrowth. The tentacle-like appendages are edged with sharp teeth or thorns, and wait in ambush for any prey that might approach it. Once an animal sets foot within range of the branches, they come alive, grabbing the unfortunate victim. The constricting tendrils then drag the prey towards the trunk, the barbs of which pierce the flesh, draining every last drop of blood. Once the carcass is dry, it is simply let go, left there to rot. Perhaps even attract more food. Some say it has a single eye it uses to locate the prey, but the most reliable sources do not mention such a feature, so make of that what you will. All in all, not a very plant-like being, more of a Lovecraftian horror. But where do these legends originate from? Well, the first notable mention of it was published in 1887, but some parts of the myth seem to be older than that. The exact details are hazy, so let me recount what we know. The primary accounts come from travelers of an era when the exploration of the remotest places of our planet was in full swing, each person coming back with a story more incredible than the last. Quite a few of these reports were recorded by James W. Buell in his 1887 book titled Sea and Land. It is a semi-scientific tome filled with both fact and fiction. Naturally, the Yetiveo falls into the latter category, mostly. In this book, it is suggested that a significant part of the legends did indeed originate from people living in the areas mentioned. The name was apparently given to it by Spanish-speaking inhabitants of Central America. However, for what reason would this name be used by natives in Central Africa or around the Indian Ocean? That's anyone's guess. The most likely explanation is confusion. From the 17th to the 20th century, tales of wondrous carnivorous trees, strangling vines, and other deadly plants appeared from time to time. This has led to a couple of these influencing each other, often getting mixed up. For the Yetiveo, the man-eating tree of Madagascar was one such vegetable. To briefly summarize this particular gourmet of humans, it was a hoax published by the New York World on the 26th of April 1874. Written by Edmund Spencer. Therefore, it wasn't ever believed to be a real thing, unlike our Yetiveo. However, it did gain much publicity, and obscured part of the quote-unquote real legend. What really annoys me is that the man-eating tree of Madagascar isn't even a proper tree. They could have given any name and description to their fake plant, and they chose to combine two that do not match. Shows you how much thought is generally behind hoaxes. But I digress. Buell or his sources might have been unknowingly or knowingly influenced by the publication, which is a good enough explanation to why such a peculiar plant would appear in Africa too. Looking at the image provided in the book, the attire and complexion of the people heavily suggests Africa, despite the Yetiveo's much stronger connection to the Americas. Nonetheless, this is what we have to work with. Let's circle back to its name. I already see you. If you've been paying attention, you'd say it got its name from the one eye it may or may not have. You'd be completely and utterly wrong, shame on you. No, this name actually derives from a sound it makes. When the plant is agitated or moves its tendrils to envelop its prey, it does so with its barbs rasping on each other. This generates a hissing noise which resembles the Spanish term as affirmed by supposed witnesses. A chilling thing to hear right before one's bloodletting. However, there is an account that claims that tentacles are not waiting for an ambush. Instead, they constantly flail around, striking at the air like the heads of a hydra having an argument. Although this seems to be quite the illogical addition. Naturally, there is no blood-sucking plant in America, but even if there was, it would be quite bad at its job if it was constantly in upheaval. First, that's tiring movement, burning a lot of energy. Second, save for a mentally challenged half-blind animal with hearing problems and arthritis, not many would move close enough to facilitate the vampiric feeding. Let's disregard this account as it cannot be true even in the fictional scenario where the plant is real. Another of Bill's sources, on the other hand, has an interesting claim. According to them, a single poisonous spike puncturing one's skin is enough to cause death. These rasping teeth are venomous and cause rapidly growing ulcers in an instant. Even if the victim miraculously escapes the clutches of the prehensile stems, the affliction is sure to take them afterwards. There are a few accounts originating from Africa as well. One tells us of Fen country. Yeah, I have no idea either where it is, but it is, or more likely was, a Central African place, if it ever existed in the first place. Regardless, here criminals and those accused of witchcraft are punished in a rather peculiar way. They are fed alive to a Yetiveo. Bad way to go, or at least it would be. As I have very subtly alluded to this a few times, there is no such thing as a vampiric tree, and the tales and reports have all been varying degrees of taking the piss or genuine belief in the impossible. While the idea is far-fetched, there is a modicum of truth to it. Welwitschia mirabilis. A weird-looking but harmless plant. It was discovered around the same time as the man-eating trees gained popularity, therefore it might have fooled even seasoned naturalists from a distance. It has a short trunk and two rather broad leaves which continue to grow throughout its life and split into strips over time. It is not hard to imagine some falling for the tales of local natives looking at it. However, this only accounts for the African version, as it grows in Namibia, which is not even Central Africa. Truth be told, this is still the only viable candidate which at least vaguely covers the features of the Yetiveo. We have to attribute this creature to almost purely the human imagination, without a significant threat tethering it to reality. No known plant would come even close to resembling this leafless horror. But that's where I come in. Given that you are watching this video, chances are you are not familiar with my specialty, crafting realistic creatures from fantastical ones. While the Yetiveo might seem like a hard nut to crack, it's not even close to the most difficult thing I had to mimic. There are two distinct ways we can go about this, only one of which is correct. Let's try keeping it a plant first. There are glaring issues with this approach already. Movement, the eye, no leaves, and drinking only blood. Can they be solved though? Let's see. We can remove the eye, as that is not a consistent feature. Leaves are not a must-have either if the tendrils are sufficiently modified. Cacti photosynthesize using their stems, and their leaves are modified into spines, which we could reliably see as the teeth of the Yetiveo. Could this blood-drinking plant pass as a cactus? Not really. First off, cacti tend to be rather stiff, which is quite detrimental to moving tentacles. However, even if we have this particular species evolve past the stiffness, regaining the flexibility of certain herbaceous plants, we still have to tackle the issue of a cactus drinking blood. Glossing over the mechanical difficulties, there are no carnivorous cacti. Does that mean there could never be one? Actually, it's not as impossible as you think. Certain carnivorous plants can be found in pretty arid environments. The Portuguese sundew, which is not an actual sundew, is a perfect example. The reason this is not an unlikely scenario is because plants catch animals to combat an issue that is also prevalent in deserts: a lack of nutrients, usually nitrogen, which is a rather limiting factor for any plant. This can be offset by their specific type of predation. Since the exact habitat of the Yetiveo is not mentioned, we are on the right track. Blood does contain nitrogen, although consuming the whole body would be a more sensible thing. We could still infer that the reports are mistaken and the plant actually digests the whole body, slowly, arms wrapped around it. The blood sucking could simply be an embellishment resulting from the copious amount of bodily fluids lost as a result of the puncturing spines. Surprisingly smooth of a transition so far from legend to reality, but there is one fatal flaw in the design: the movement method for plants. When a plant moves in any way, it does so by changing the turgor pressure within parts of its body. Turgor refers to internal water content. The trouble is that this is a rather limited mechanism for any sort of motion. It can be quick for a small plant, like a sundew. It could also move these massive tentacle stems, but due to their huge size and weight, it would be extremely slow. Unless we are talking about something that is already dead, it wouldn't be able to catch anything. The evolution of muscles for a plant is borderline impossible, let alone without any evolutionary steps in between. Even though resetting traps is an observable feature for such plants, it would do nothing but slowly coil and uncoil its tendrils with nothing caught. Therefore, we have to move on to the much more disturbing option, which fits a lot better. An animal that is a cephalopod, something not unlike a terrestrial member of the Archaeoptidae family, or giant squids. In this alternative reality, we will have the ancestors of these animals try their luck on land. Sounds like an odd idea, right? Something very unlikely. Well, it is unprecedented, but it's certainly within the realms of possibility. In The Future is Wild, a speculative project imagining life on Earth after humans are gone, scientists theorize pterosquids to take over land, which is by then abandoned by vertebrates. Now, obviously this is just an odd idea. However, there is sound reasoning behind how these animals might make the transition. Reasoning I'm going to use at least partially. We need to go way back, possibly to the Silurian to justify all this. Here I go, altering natural history again. However, this is the prime period for an early cephalopod to venture onto land, as competition is still quite timid. As for what species or order, that is practically meaningless for us, as there are hundreds of millions of years to go in terms of evolution. What we should discuss though are the specific adaptations required for our abhorrent abomination of a creature to live on land and partake in the entanglement of unsuspecting explorers. I should cover the external features first, so I have an image to show you in the meantime. So, life on land requires a bit more structural integrity than water. The shell its ancestors had could have very well transformed into an internal structure similar to a cuttle bone, only more ribcage-like. Under the body there are pads, modified tentacles that facilitate land movement, not unlike the feet of snails. However, in the case of the Yetiveo, these also double as digging implements. We'll get back to the reasoning in a bit. The remaining tentacles, let's say 8, as that would be enough to be mistaken for the thing on this image, also serve a dual function. While the pads aid in locomotion, the tendrils themselves have to pull a significant part of the creature's weight. Hence, they should be rather muscular. Taking another page out of the book of the fictional pterosquids, the horizontal muscles of these arms are surrounded by a circular set. This grants a stronger structure without bones, as well as the strength necessary for the other function, which is catching prey. The barbs so prominently featured in descriptions are what took the place of suction cups. Even on the arms of actual squids living today, hidden within said suction cups are hooks that help in grabbing stuff. With the water removed from the equation, the suckers are not that useful, but the hooks are all the more necessary. The eyes are also going to stay, as they provide confirmation for when to strike. Since each beeper is on either side of the Yetiveo, it is no surprise that witnesses mistook it for some cyclopean horror, instead of a regular two-eyed horror. The outer layer of the animal also has to develop into something more akin to mammalian skin, keeping the moisture in and providing protection. Let's not forget the lungs either. Terrestrial life at this size is not possible without an efficient respiratory system. The openings that take in the air should be relatively close to the head. Having it among the tentacles is not a smart choice, as it would restrict these nose substitutes. Near the neck is sufficient, as it has to stay above ground. Yes, above ground. As I've mentioned, the pet feet double as digging implements. Such a cumbersome, slow-moving predator is unlikely to catch a leaping gazelle or swift hare, unless it uses ambush tactics. Having originated from ectothermic, or in other words, cold-blooded ancestors, it is well equipped to spend long stretches of time relatively motionless with a minimal use of calories due to their slow metabolism. For proper concealment, the Yetiveo burrows a large chunk of its body when it wants to feed. It spreads its tentacles far and wide, hiding them in the grass or litter. We already know what happens if an animal decides to come close enough. The nearest tendril grabs it with the added help of the hooks. Then the rest reaffirm the grip. As a next step, the Yetiveo takes a bite. Now, similarly to the experimental plant version, it shouldn't be a vampire. This big boy needs more sustenance. Consistently mistaken for a tree, it has to be close to at least the size of a bush. However, there is a possible explanation. The affair would be admittedly bloody, as the tearing hooks would create a few holes in the prey. With all that blood, no wonder explorers and locals had the wrong impression. Additionally, there is indeed an implement that tears into the body, but it is not a group of spikes meant to suck blood. No, the thing mistaken for those spikes are the two halves of its beak. another feature resulting from its cephalopod nature. Although there is still one more weapon, one we should omit, the venom. It makes no sense for a practically immobile creature to kill its prey with delayed effect. It would have real trouble pursuing an asthmatic sloth, let alone a frightened deer. Alright, that's an exaggeration, it wouldn't be that slow, but still not the chasing type. The legend could simply be attributed to the infection of the lacerations caused by the hooks. Something bound to happen in those exotic environments. The origin of the hissing may stay the same. The tentacles should have a rather thick skin, which protects them from their own hooks, producing the eerie sound instead when dragged across each other. We are almost done, but the vast range the creature was reported from requires attention. Now, we are talking about animals that significantly differ from other cephalopods, so much so that I would hazard to put them in a class of their own, since they diverged from their common ancestors pretty far back and were likely among the first animals to try their luck on land. It is fair to assume that finding their niche in that environment, they became pretty widespread. With the advent of vertebrates though, they were outcompeted at numerous habitats, only surviving in select locales. As time passed and tectonic plates shifted more and more, these populations found themselves completely isolated from each other, huge distances apart. Hence, these organisms can be found on different continents, but they are not the same species or genus, even family. They continue to evolve in their own way, adapting to the specific habitat they found themselves in. Therefore, the Yetiveo is not a single creature, but a varied class. There you have it. That's the realistic man-eating tree for you. I think it is significantly more terrifying than the original. A job well done, I'd say. Alright, I've talked your ear off for long enough. I'll let the next person take it from here.
Ah, there you are. Don't be shy. Come closer. Don't worry, you're not interrupting anything. I'm rarely productive. Ah, admiring my portrait, I see. Yes, as a connoisseur and sometimes patron of the arts, I have an extensive appreciation for the amount of effort it takes to produce even a single piece. But what, pray tell, would you say if our next guest was a YouTuber who integrates his own original illustrations into his work? What's that? The fuck you mean OSP? You spoiled brats? You think we could get red on this collaboration? Jesus Christ, man. Anyway, presenting a mythical creature from his native land of Armenia, here is Mythology and Beyond.
Sometimes also called Alk, are demons from the ancient world. They are found in Armenian mythology and folklore. These half-human, half-beasts are both male and female. They are described as creatures with brass fingernails, tattered hair, sharp teeth, and long, sharp tusks. In some stories, they have a fiery single eye that can terrify anyone who has the misfortune of meeting it. And whenever the owl wears its pointy hat, with bells hanging from its wide brim, it becomes completely invisible to the naked eye. These creatures sometimes tend to carry steel scissors with them. they may possibly be compared to the Babylonian Alu, evil spirits in the shape of dark dogs that spread disease and misfortune throughout the land. But what makes the Al utterly terrifying is that they attack pregnant women and infants. Their hatred for a woman with child has no bound. The Al will try and kill the pregnant woman by strangling her and stealing her liver, at the same time killing the unborn child. In some stories, it is known to steal children up to 7 months of age. Fortunately, that child can be saved only if the Al is stopped before it crosses a large body of water. But once the Al crosses water, water symbolizing transformation, that child can never be brought back. Where does this hatred of woman and child come from? Even though the Al is an ancient story, it has found its way into the Abrahamic faiths. In Christianity, one story tells us, in the Garden of Eden, God gave Adam an Al as a companion, but the Al who was made out of fire was incompatible with Adam, who was made out of dust. Therefore, God created Eve. This made the jealous Al furious towards Eve and her descendants, until to this day. A similar story is also found in Islamic writings, where the Al is replaced by the Jinn, who is also made of fire. And in Hebrew writings, Lilith, the first wife of Adam, takes the place of the Al. Fortunately, the ancient storytellers also gave us a way to protect ourselves from these creatures. One such remedy of protection is surrounding oneself with iron utensils, such as pots, pans, nails, and other objects. Such creatures of old have a disdain towards iron, making them weak and vulnerable. A pregnant woman must sleep with a piece of iron under her pillow, such as a pin or a charm. And in some legends, sticking an iron pin on the blouse of an Al will make it subservient to the one who pinned it. The Al is just one of many such creatures that inhabited the psyche of the ancient world. Myths and legends in ancient stories are strange sometimes, but it is a way of explaining the unexplainable.
You know, Halloween is my favorite time of the year, and not because I'm a white girl who will consume pumpkin spice anything. Halloween has changed faces and names the world over for centuries. It started out as a Celtic tradition called Samhain, before getting bastardized into the diabetes epidemic we know and love today. However, in other parts of the world, Halloween is a bit of a foreign concept. Take, for example, my next guest, who hails from a land where rather than Halloween, they observe a harvest festival. Now I know what you're thinking. What kind of backwater shithole still practices archaic pagan rituals for crops? Don't worry, he's Finnish and recognizes the last good thing to come out of his country was Simo Heiha. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present my buddy, Hermias Malak.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I am Hermias Malak, guest of Messiahs and Mythology, and happy Halloween to all viewers. I like to thank Messiahs and Mythology for the invite and opportunity to make a collaboration video with him and the others who are participating. Finnish mythology has a lot of horrifying entities of death and afterlife. The entity I am going to give you my knowledge of through a poem is an entity of pain and sickness called kiputyttö or kivutar, roughly translated maiden of pain. Here is my poem of kiputyttö. Kiputyttö, the maiden of pain, the collector of all bodily bane. In hill of pain she finds her rest, and fulfills her never-ending quest. Daughter of Tuonela, matron of the dead, given a duty she needs to attend. Tuonela will not her own children nurse, gives them duties to make them disperse. Kiputyttö's existence is a tragedy, a trial so dark for her mentality. Bound to her duty, for better or worse, Tuonela's orders were more of a curse. For Finns, she is a saint who heals, remover of pain that someone feels. When prayers of relief are brought forth, she carries the pain to its final port. To the hill of pain she carries it all, to the dark top standing there tall. Carefully handles the pain so dire, puts them into her cauldron on a fire. When cooked, she pours all into the rock, onward again her cauldrons to restock. Her cursed toil has no final curtain, for the pain has become her burden. Like a drug for pain she has urge, becoming her own punishment scourge. Clawing her skin, blood flowing like rain, her own devotion driving her insane. If people are with their prayers shy, they can hear her dark, manic cry.
Few things in this life are more terrifying than past trauma. Perhaps for you, it's watching some poor squirrel get run over by your dickhead father who intentionally swerved out of the lane to hit it. Maybe it's the sad news that the family dog was hit by a pickup truck in a cul-de-sac neighborhood where your father is the only one who owns a pickup truck. Or conceivably, it's finding your neighbor's cat's corpse out by the woods when your father got drunk one night, decided July was a perfect time for deer season, and somehow confused a jet black cat in the middle of the night for a 10-point buck. And, holy fuck, I just realized that my father has all the characteristics of a serial killer. I should probably get on changing my last name. Speaking of daddy issues, I guess now's as good a time as any to throw my hat into the ring. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know who I am by now, that's a you problem. There's something about the Philippines I just can't put my finger on. Well, besides its geographical location on a map, because I'm always afraid I'm going to lump it in with Indonesia and all the other Polynesian cock-teased nations. It's a land where its most prized commodity are its women, whose scrawny white guys parade around as their trophy, quote-unquote, Asian wife, and is most well known for having some of the shittiest internet connections on the face of the planet. Besides myself. Aside from those things, most people can't tell you the first thing about the Philippines, much less how many islands there are. However, I think that I may be of some service to my haplessly educated American audiences by introducing them to Filipino anitism, as I believe this is one of the more fascinating yet horribly preserved faiths the world over, essentially starting out as a conglomerate of ancestor-worshipping ethnic peoples glue-sticking their cultural identities together before they are found out by inlanders and exposed to such things as Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, you know what happens with that, and Shintoism. So naturally, with the religion of these peoples being an interesting mesh of cultures, of which two of them being my all-time favorite mythologies, you've got a recipe for another Orcadian mythology, where it's far easier to appreciate the forest rather than try to deconstruct the individual origins of the trees. That being said, at least the Orcadians got a proverbial mascot in the form of the Nukullavi. Shameless plug here, which is more than Antism can say, though they aren't exactly short on unique and terrifying monstrosities themselves. Hence finally bringing me full circle to my submission for this year's Halloween, the Aswang. Now the term Aswang is a bit of an all-encompassing word, similar to what we Westerners might call cryptids. However, the bulk of the Aswang can be sorted into 5 main categories: witches, ghouls, vampires, were-creatures, and my personal favorite, for obvious reasons, viscera suckers, which is just a PC way of saying anus vacuum. More properly referred to by the Filipino people as the manananggal, these guys are known to get up close and freaky with their long tube-shaped tongues which they stick into some hapless victims' lower orifices and suck so hard they actually end up devoweling them.
Somebody point me to the best ass eater.
However, the manananggal don't exactly play fair. While they love eating ass in the most extreme way possible, they only do so at night, where they make sure to tear the torso off from the rest of their body, then hide their goodies before going on the nightly ass patrol. Why they do this isn't exactly clear, though I can only assume one of them tried this on a guy with an incredibly kinky fetish who played an Uno reverse card and felt like he should return the favor. I feel like I just scared away any potential subscribers. Those of you mentally unstable to get my sick and twisted sense of humor are in luck, as the manananggal are said to have 2 different favorite foods. One is anal mucus and the other is a developing fetus. There is an incredibly low-hanging fruit of a joke that I could make about how these guys were the original Planned Parenthood centuries before the KKK, but I have some standards. Says the guy who literally called these things anus vacuums not 5 minutes ago. It's just funny. Similar to the manananggals are the Filipino vampires, sometimes referred to as mandurugo. However, unlike the vampires of Bram Stoker's Dracula, these creatures suck blood from their syringe-shaped tongues, which pierce their victims and start to suck them dry like that thing out of Starship Troopers. Except they take their time with it. It's said that the mandurugo will disguise itself as a beautiful woman and take on a husband who they will bleed dry while they sleep at night. The trade-off is that's not the only thing they'll be sucking. Patrons of mine might find the Filipino ghoul to be rather similar to a creature from Japanese mythology called the Jiki-ninki, or corpse zombie. It's exactly what it sounds like. It digs up people's graves and then eats their bodies. The most infamous of these ghouls around the Philippines is the bao-bao, another nocturnal creature who lurks around in human form during the day, but then transforms himself into a horribly disfigured humanoid with razor-sharp teeth and claws who haunts the fresh burial grounds of the recently deceased, tearing their bodies to shreds, then leaves a trunk of a banana tree behind in their casket, which I guess is supposed to fool their family members into thinking that this was the work of a grave robber. Although I must ask the obvious question, who the fuck steals a corpse and goes through all the trouble of chopping down a banana tree and sticking it in there afterwards? Like, can you imagine how much it would undercut the menace of Dr. Frankenstein if he dug up corpses to build his monster, then left behind an edible arrangement and an apology note? Apparently, though, the bao-bao is harmless to living humans unless you invoke his name, at which point he will Jeffrey Dahmer you, minus the sodomy. However, considering I've done so twice now in this video, I'm going to tip my fedora, sip from my White Claw, and say, checkmate, theists. The were-creatures are pretty self-explanatory, though don't make the mistake of calling them werewolves, as the Philippines have no native wolf population. What they do have are were-dogs, were-cats, and were-pigs. Any reference to werewolves is racist, and I will be forced to report you to the ADLA, who already have a file on me. Yeah, okay, I won't do that. These creatures are said to take the form of a human during the day, though around midnight they transform into their true form, hunting down and devouring humans, particularly the fetuses of pregnant women. Jesus Christ, why do the Filipinos hate babies so much? However, if you are a woman who finds herself knocked up and in the Philippines at night, there is a way to repel these creatures, and that is to let your hair down. Apparently, they don't like finding strangers' hair in their food, even when their food is the stranger themselves. I get it, I've eaten at Subway before too. The last of the Aswang I'll be covering today are the practitioners of the Filipino black magic, or kulam, called Mangkukulam, or for the sake of brevity, witches. These Aswang are primarily concentrated around the islands of Samar and, Siquijor? I think? Which have a negative connotation attached to them to this day by their neighboring islands, which isn't helped by their reputation as a home for faith healers, which implies either witchcraft or a pop-up ad on a porn site for a supplement which doctors don't want you to know about, which will, ironically, shrink the size of your penis. Do not ask me how I know. Kulam is thought to have its origins in the practices of voodoo, as one of its tenets involves using a doll of a certain person's likeness and inflicting injuries upon that person's physical form by use of needles, fire, or I guess just tossing them down the stairs a couple of times. But the real distinguishing feature of Kulam is a practice of making uncooked rice, bones, or even live insects come out of a certain bodily orifice I can't show on YouTube. But let's just say it's either the same area you might pass a kidney stone out of, or the place the mananagal might tongue. Or both. Kulam is seen by outsiders to the regions it's practiced in as malicious, corrupting black magic which deforms the user to have elongated lizard-like pupils in their eyes, which reflect the light and images upside down. Though the people who actually practice it claim that the magic only ever works on those who are impure of heart and in need of punishment, and that the magic is truly harmless to those who are righteous. And if being a good person means not having a beanstalk grow out of my urethra, maybe I will stop flipping off the Salvation Army guy who stands outside the mall at Christmas. Maybe. And this concludes our presentation on the Aswang. My name is Messiahs in Mythology, and I'll now pass things along to our gracious and very handsome host. Well, I don't know who that handsome fellow was, but I sure as hell wouldn't want to subscribe to that channel on YouTube. But no, seriously, please validate my ego. Up next is the only female who has actually bothered associating with me in any conceivable way in the last 3 years. Hailing from España, it's the lovely Mythology in Mind. Which I would like to point out is the third contributor to this collaboration with an alliterative use of M's in their name. I have a sudden urge to purge the world of the false pretenders by having the three of us meet up at some random coordinates in Nevada so I can whack them with a pool noodle. But I'm not sure why. Oh, right, we're doing a video. But afterwards...
Okay, Eminem, don't panic, but we need to appeal to this audience. What do we do? A mythology video? I was referring to your qualities. What do you have that other creators here don't? My dark sense of humor? Hell no, Messiah is way funnier than you.
Yes! I am!
Just think about something. I don't know. I have boobs. That joke is dead. Katya may be with us right now. And also, it was dead from the start. Honey, I'm sorry to be telling you this, but you don't have. I'm sorry, I'm bad at intros. Just tell me, what do you have that others here don't? Dead mom jokes. Dead mom jokes. God's fucking damn it, myself, I was trying to hold back from those. I mean, it's Halloween, I think it fits thematically. Hello, messiahs and mythologers, I guess. I'm Mythology and Mind. You can call me Eminem. Even though I think Messiah sometimes calls himself that. Not anymore, that's mine, sorry baby. And today I will be referring to you as my beautiful basilisks, which is what I expect of you to become after this. Even though I am annoying as hell, as you can already tell. Today we talk about creatures, and I thought I could present to you one of my country. I'm Spanish, by the way, if you couldn't tell by the accent. If you are from the States, you are probably thinking about something like this. God bless you, honey. If you instead are from a first world country, you are probably thinking about this. I mean, you are closer, but my creature is from the north of Spain, which looks something like this. I think it's important to imagine the creatures in context, so keep in mind we are in Cantabria now. This means that almost half of the year is raining, everything is covered in green. It's basically like Scotland, but with less rain and better food. You may be wondering, are you going to start talking about the creature any day? Yes, shut up, let me rant. Well, you see, at first I was going to talk about the Sanas, which are fairies that swipes human babies for their own, so humans baptize them. I think it really represents Spain, you know, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. But then I came across this baby, which is basically an incel or a pygmy girl made creature. And how could I not fall in love with that? So let's begin talking about it. The Monuka is a cursed creature, born in spring once every 11 years. It is a crossing between a male gato montes, or wildcat, and a female garduña, which is basically a subspecies of weasel. Not the most frightening combination of animals, but whatever. It's only born inside of caves, I guess it's the best place to be born in wildlife anyway, and it has no color, and is blind, as a baby Monuka, as the expression goes. It leaves the cave for unknown reasons. Maybe the garduña rejects it, maybe it was looking for its mother's teeth while she slept and it got lost. Who knows? Who cares? The legend doesn't specify about this. Anyway, it lives in the forest for a few days, which many are not specified, until it starts seeing. To celebrate this, it goes back into the cave, where its mother conveniently is, it sucks her blood and gouges out her eyes. After its revenge, it lives near rivers until it acquires its peculiar color palette. The head stays white as wool, its tail becomes purple, and its body presents a combination of blue, red and black. At first, it hunts grasshoppers and turtle doves, but then it grows more and it starts sucking blood from lambs and children, which is terrifying enough in a society when you need desperately both. When it turns 5 years old, it gets so big and fat that it can no longer climb trees or even run, thing that his father, the Gato Montes, takes advantage of. He gouges out the eyes of his son with his claws to avenge the dead mother. And let me tell you about dead mothers, because I actually know a lot about this subject. Blinded again, the Monuka ends up dying of starvation, hunted by other animals, or by falling off a cliff. The Gato Montes takes the eyes of his son to his burrow, where he buries them, and after this, he dies of sadness, as a need for revenge. Was the only thing that had kept him alive. Shakespeare would be so proud. There are a few more subspecies of Monuka, which are all very rare. They don't have any particular names other than Monuka, so I gave them subcategories, so we don't get lost. One of them is what I like to call the TikTok Monuka, which, as its name indicates, is a Monuka with its hair black and red, and one eye of each one of those colors. This Monuka kills their father instead of their mother. The garduña is the one that attacks it when the 5 years pass, but instead of gouging out its eyes, because it was getting pretty repetitive, it bites off its leg. So the Monuka dies eaten by other animals or bleeds to death. Another one is the trad wife Monuka. This one is born once in 100 years, and it's white with a circle of red dots in its spine, and in the middle of this circle there is a purple spot. You can only kill it if you nail a large pin in there. I don't know how much this creature have to suffer for humans to discover this, but I bet it's a lot. The weirdest type of Monuka is the STL, or the stuck traffic light. It's only born one every 200 years, so people know little about it. These ones are born from a male bear and a female wild boar. And I have questions. 1. Why is the creature exactly the same if the parents are of two completely different species from the rest of the Monukas? And 2. How and why? How and why? This is an image I'll never be able to wipe out of my head, and it will slowly make me mad, but anyways. Of this animal, it's only known that its head is red and it glows at night, which is pretty shitty evolution when you need to camouflage yourself. Hi, editing M&M here. I have discovered one last type of Monuka. The 34 rule furry Monuka. There is so little written about this creature, and there is a furry Monuka. I mean, I'm not complaining, but anyway, back to the original video. Do you know what all Monukas have in common? That they hate women, hence the incel/pick-me girl metaphor. And they attack them if they're trying to be picked by one, trying to gouge out their eyes and drink its blood, like he did with his mother. But if a man finds one and takes it to his home, the Monuka will grant him good luck for all his life. I don't know how that would work if the man is married to a woman or if he has children. Meh, who knows? Maybe incels are the only ones who can see them. I couldn't find anything more written about the Monuka, so I guess I will see myself out. Don't forget to check out my channel for Greek mythology and psychology videos, or just to hear me in general. I know you hate it, but you're a masochist, aren't you?
Yes!
Wow, what incredibly cliché weather we're having. Regardless, this evening is slowly drawing to a close. I hope you all have enjoyed tonight's festivities and will check out the channels of my esteemed guests this evening. But for now, we have one final content creator to get to, who also happens to be Finnish. Meaning that yes, I have approximately 15% of the total Finnish population guest starring in this video. May I present, for the stimulation of your brain and possibly other organs depending on how you feel about his accent, my good friend, Antti Palosari.
A malevolent primordial sea monster or an ancient god of war. Let's take a look at Tursas or Ikutursa. The name derives from Thurisas, meaning giant or Jötun, an ancient non-human being of Norse mythology. The ancient nature of Tursas is reinforced by one of its many names, Ikutursa, where the prefix means eternal, or one that has stood there since the beginning of times. According to Mikael Agricola, Turisas voiton antoi sodast, brought victory in war. Martti Haavio says that Tursas was likely not a hero who became a god after his death. Until the 20th century, Tursas was considered to derive from the Levantine god Baal, as well as the Greek Ares, and Scandinavian Thor and Tyr. However, none of these are probably right. Tursas' family tree is also interesting. Sometimes referred to as son of Ukko, sometimes even father of Väinämöinen himself, and sometimes having affairs with Louhi or Loviatar, queen of the north and primary antagonist of Kalevala, our national epic, as both of them have been given credit for giving birth to disease. Whether the sea monster and the god of war are the same thing has been subject to debate among scholars. And if they are, why and how did the Tavastians start worshipping a sea monster as a god of war? Or did a god of war turn into a sea monster at some point? How does Tursas look like? He, she, they, whatever, are often called the bearded one, depicted with a slimy beard, usually tentacular. Tursas is an old euphemism or name for walrus, which is why I've given it walrus tusks. As Tursas was a considerable threat to boats, let's say up to Viking longboat size, it would need to be of a formidable size itself. However, the mean depth of the Baltic Sea where it hunts is only 55 meters, and growing too big would mean troubles navigating on the shallow coastlines. So I think the size I've depicted here is reasonable. To reach this size, Tursas probably needs a very high-calorie diet. I assume it consists mostly of cider whales, which appear in Finland in large quantities. Ikutursa makes perhaps his most famous appearance in Kalevala, when Louhi summons him to drown Väinämöinen and his crew. Väinämöinen, however, kicks his ass, and Tursas promises to stay beneath the waves and never appear again, and so far has kept his promise. Our guy Tursas also has his own symbol called Tursansydän, meaning the heart of Tursas. It consists of 4 looped squares or rectangles, and was used to bring good luck in woodwork, much like the Hannunvaakuna. According to Martti Haavio again, it's connected to the Valknut and Hrugningshjarta from Scandinavia. That was a short intro to Tursas, a god of war or a sea monster. What do you think? Drop your thoughts and prayers in the comments.
Well, folks, there you have it, yet another year in the books. I want to thank all the collaborators on this video for humoring my clusterfuck of an idea. If any of you folks at home aren't subscribed to any of these wonderful people, links will be listed in the description down below to each of their channels in order of appearance. At least in my upload of this video. Which submission was your favorite? Should we do something like this next year for Halloween? How about another holiday like Kwanzaa or some shit? I don't know. Fuck off. Let us know in the comments section and I'll see what I can organize. And with all that being said, I hope you all have a happy and safe Halloween, and as I always say on my channel, have a God's blessed evening. Now get the fuck out of my decrepit old house.